Usually when we talk about making smart decisions, there's this expectation of a really clear, straightforward cost-benefit analysis.
Right, like looking at a math problem.
Exactly. Think about finance, right? You see a bad investment completely draining your bank account, and the financial advisor just points at the glaring red numbers on the screen.
And says, well, cut your losses.
Right. The line is going down, so you get out.
We find profound comfort in that idea, honestly. The belief that we are ultimately rational creatures.
Yeah.
We like to assume that when something actively, undeniably hurts us, our fundamental instinct for self-preservation just automatically kicks in.
And we just walk away.
Exactly. We just walk away.
But then you step into the messy world of human relationships.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole different game.
And suddenly that logical spreadsheet is just completely on fire. I mean, we find ourselves looking at situations where the smartest, most analytical people you know are trapped in dynamics that completely defy all reason.
It really represents the absolute pinnacle of a behavioral paradox.
And that paradox is exactly what we are getting into on today's deep dive. So we are tackling a question that has probably baffled every single person listening to this at some point in their lives.
I got a job.
Why do smart, logical people stay in terrible, toxic relationships?
Yeah.
And to get to the bottom of this, we're looking at a really comprehensive guide compiled by Coach Jacky.
Yeah, it's titled, Why Toxic Love Can Feel Brutally Addictive.
Right. And it utilizes a framework called NITTI to kind of dismantle these dynamics from the inside out.
Which is so important because we are moving completely away from the judgment of asking, why don't they just leave?
The worst question.
Right. Instead, we're looking under the hood at the actual mechanics.
So our mission today is to explore the neuroscience, the psychology, and honestly, even the covert spycraft behind these toxic bonds.
Spycraft. I love that part.
It's wild. We want to give you, the listener, the exact language to understand how your own brain can actually confuse pure chaos with profound chemistry. Okay, let's unpack this. The source establishes a really stark baseline right away.
Yet a healthy bond gives you two fundamental things, safety and pleasure.
Right. But a toxic bond, that delivers stress, relief, uncertainty, and then
An occasional, totally unpredictable reward.
exactly.
And that specific combination is a highly combustible biological recipe. I mean, we operate under this grand assumption that humans only form strong attachments through pleasure and comfort.
Which makes sense on paper.
It does. But the biological foundation we have to establish first is that the mammalian brain forms incredibly stubborn bonds through intermittent reinforcement.
And stress chemistry.
Exactly. Before we analyze the psychological reasons why someone stays, we have to look at the physical body getting genuinely addicted to a relentless cycle of hurt and relief.
Wow. Okay, let's get into the chemistry of that chaos then. The source breaks down this toxic recipe starting with dopamine, which, I feel like dopamine has excellent PR.
It really does.
Right. I always assumed dopamine was simply the feel-good pleasure chemical. You get it when you eat a piece of cake or something.
Well, what's fascinating here is that dopamine is not actually the reward itself.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It is the chemical of anticipation, motivation, and pursuit. It's the maybe this time molecule.
Oh, wow.
So when a reward is highly predictable, say a loving partner who is consistently kind to you every single day, your dopamine levels actually remain relatively stable.
Because there's no mystery.
Exactly. But when affection is entirely unpredictable, like when you receive a sudden, sweet message after 3 grueling days of cold silence.
Your dopamine just spikes massively.
Right. Your brain begins aggressively scanning the environment for any sign that the good version of this person is about to return.
It's like the brain turns the entire relationship into a casino slot machine.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
You aren't stepping back and asking, is this game actually good for my life anymore? You're just standing there pulling the lever asking, when is the next hit coming?
You've stopped evaluating the structural quality of the relationship entirely.
Right.
You're just compelled by the sheer force of the intermittent reward. And while you are standing at that metaphorical slot machine pulling the lever, your body is simultaneously being flooded with cortisol and adrenaline.
Just a total chemical cocktail.
Because the dynamic is chronically unstable, your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
The HPA axis, right?
Yes, the HPA axis, it just kicks into overdrive.
Wait, the HPA axis, for those of us who aren't neuroscientists, is that basically the body's central alarm system, like communicating directly with our organs to prep us for danger?
That is the perfect way to describe it. It's a complex set of direct influences and, well, feedback interactions among the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands.
Okay, so it's a whole network.
Exactly. When it detects chronic instability, it signals the sympathetic nervous system to stay on high alert.
Which feels like what?
Well, you experience a racing heart, shallow breathing, gastrointestinal issues, poor sleep, and just constant muscle tension.
Your physical body is reading the romantic relationship as a physically dangerous, threatening environment.
Yes. Your body is literally treating your partner like a predator hiding in the bushes.
That is so intense, which brings the amygdala into the picture, right? The brain's ultimate threat detector.
All right. The amygdala processes all of this repeated conflict, the maddening mixed signals, the severe emotional whiplash, and it tags the relationship in your brain as intensely
Important.
But notice the vital, dangerous distinction there. It does not tag the relationship as safe.
Important, but not safe. Man, that feels like a brutal combination for human survival.
It really is.
It means you can't just walk away and forget about the person. You are biologically obligated to constantly monitor the threat they pose.
It forces a state of permanent hypervigilance. You simply cannot afford to miss a single behavioral cue.
And while your amygdala is blasting the alarm, what's happening to the rest of the brain?
Well, your prefrontal cortex, the specialized part of the brain responsible for logic, long-term perspective, and rational judgment, is essentially under siege.
Under siege. Wow.
Yeah. Chronic, elevated stress physically weakens your top-down cognitive control.
Which perfectly explains why, my incredibly smart friend can logically outline exactly why her partner is terrible for her over coffee on a Tuesday.
Right, the spreadsheet is clear.
Yeah, but then she still can't bring herself to pack her bags that night.
Because it isn't a lack of willpower or a sudden drop in intelligence.
It's cognition under siege.
Exactly. The logic center is getting completely drowned out by the biological alarm bells demanding immediate survival.
Short-term relief suddenly feels vastly more urgent than long-term wisdom.
Especially when your nervous system believes it is literally fighting for its life. But the most profound shift in this entire process happens with the vagus nerve.
Okay, tell me about the vagus nerve.
So it's a major component of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system that calms you down, slows your resting heart rate, and signals that the danger is past.
Like the brakes on a car.
Right. In a volatile dynamic, you swing wildly from that sympathetic panic of a fight straight into parasympathetic calm when the partner finally apologizes or shows a shred of affection.
Oh, wow. So you start to deeply associate the exact person who caused the terrifying panic with the physical feeling of finally being able to exhale.
Your nervous system actually outsources its own regulation to the very person who is destabilizing it in the first place.
That is terrifying.
It is. You stop chasing genuine joy or growth. You simply start chasing baseline regulation.
You're just trying to get your head above water.
Exactly.
And when you finally hit that baseline, when you get that brief, fleeting moment of regulation, the brain logs it in a very distorted way. We see this in the source material with the concept of the peak illusion.
Yes. The hippocampus plays a massive role here.
The memory center.
Right, it helps us with memory formation and context. However, in a volatile, highly unpredictable environment, the brain tends to heavily overweight intensely emotional moments.
Like the dramatic stuff.
Exactly. The tearful midnight confessions, the sweeping desperate apologies, the dramatic "I've never loved anyone like you" speeches.
Right.
Those highly charged events get stored with a massive emotional weight compared to the daily drudgery of being ignored.
So when things are predictably terrible and all your friends are begging you to leave, your brain just pulls up these highlighted, glittering peak moments as undeniable hard proof that the relationship is actually transcendent and deeply special.
You're clinging to the proof of the fantasy.
Wow.
Leaving isn't just about walking away from a flawed human being. You are having to grieve the fantasy, those peak emotional memories, and the promised future that those peaks represented.
And nowhere is this peak illusion more universally powerful than in the dynamic of makeup sex. I mean, the source dives incredibly deep into this specific phenomenon.
It does. It notes how many people report that intimacy after a huge blowout fight feels explosive. Far more intense than regular day-to-day intimacy.
Okay, hold on. I really have to push back on this, or at least ask for some clarification. Because trying to visualize the biology here, If a person's body is completely exhausted by all this cortisol, the adrenaline crashes, the hypervigilance we just talked about,
Hmm.
how do they even have the physical or mental energy for intense physical connection?
It's a great question.
Because whenever I'm severely stressed or fighting with someone, my body just wants to shut down, build a wall, and sleep. How does sheer exhaustion and fear turn into passion?
I know it sounds totally counterintuitive, but it boils down to a well-documented psychological phenomenon called arousal transfer.
Arousal transfer?
Yeah. After a screaming match or a period of intense anxiety, your body is highly activated. Your heart rate is elevated, adrenaline is pumping, your breathing is shallow, and your attention is incredibly narrow.
Okay, right, the fight or flight stuff.
Exactly. That intense physiological activation doesn't just vanish the second the argument stops.
That has to go somewhere.
Right. Instead, it gets misread or completely rechanneled by the body into sexual intensity. The physical arousal of anger is hijacked by the desire for connection.
So the fear literally gets recycled by the brain into passion because the physical symptoms like the racing heart, the sweat, are so similar.
Add to that the power of the contrast effect.
Contrast effect.
Yeah. Regular, healthy intimacy usually starts from a calm, safe, somewhat neutral baseline,
Mm,
but makeup sex. It starts from a place of absolute, terrifying chaos.
right.
The sheer contrast between thinking the relationship is over
Mm,
and suddenly being physically held
mm.
makes the reconnection feel incredibly bright and hot.
The relief itself becomes an intoxicant.
Exactly. The underlying psychological message being exchanged isn't just we're connecting physically.
Mm.
It's the threat has passed, I matter again, we survived the storm.
Yes.
It carries all this heavy existential symbolic weight,
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness, survival, being chosen again after being rejected.
Which is incredibly potent.
Realizing this out loud based on the source's breakdown,
Mm,
the intimacy isn't actually deeper or more profound at all.
not at all.
It's just a biological
Or
ceasefire.
biological ceasefire. That captures the dynamic perfectly. It's two completely exhausted nervous systems using a physical act to prove to themselves that they survived the war they just fought with each other.
Stronger intensity during these moments does not equal a healthier or more profound bond. It usually just indicates that the attachment panic leading up to it was exceptionally high.
Man. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because we firmly established the biology here. The body gets hijacked by cortisol, the memory gets distorted by the hippocampus, and we end up in these biological ceasefires.
Right.
But what I love about this source material is that it doesn't just stop at the anatomy of the brain. It takes this exact same phenomenon and looks at it through 4 completely different disciplines.
It's a fantastic approach.
It provides this incredible panoramic view of why the trap is so hard to escape.
And seeing it from these different analytical lenses really helps dismantle the illusion from all sides, removing the shame for the person experiencing it.
Exactly. Let's start with the psychological lens, specifically referencing the work of psychotherapist Esther Perel.
Right. She explores the delicate tension between love and desire. Her framework helps explain why instability becomes eroticized in the first place.
How so?
Well, in a toxic dynamic, uncertainty actually inflames the imagination. The constant threat of rupture dramatically increases the longing for the partner.
Oh, so people begin to confuse the gut-wrenching anxiety of a toxic bond with actual world-altering passion.
Exactly. They start to think, well, if I'm not agonizing over this person, if I'm not crying over whether they'll call, it must not be true love.
Which tragically makes healthy, stable, consistent love feel overwhelmingly boring to them.
It generates a counterfeit passion. They are missing the adrenaline spikes, not the actual chemistry of the person.
Wow. Okay, and then the source takes a fascinating pivot into the lens of Andrew Bustamante.
Applying literal CIA spycraft to romantic relationships.
This section absolutely blew my mind. Applying intelligence agency tactics to someone's dating life.
It's chillingly accurate, honestly, because toxic dynamics run on the exact same mechanics as covert control systems.
Like
Well, you see extreme information asymmetry.
information asymmetry.
Right, where one person knows the true motives, their own loyalties, or, their side relationships, while deliberately keeping the other person entirely in the dark.
Total manipulation.
And you see intermittent disclosure, where tiny fragments of the truth are just drip-fed to keep the target constantly off balance.
Just giving them enough to keep them hooked.
Exactly. This calculated unpredictability deeply destabilizes your internal compass.
Because the more disoriented you become, the more you have to rely on the manipulator to tell you what's actually real,
They capture your entire narrative.
which leads to this profound, damaging betrayal. The person you desperately need for safety and truth becomes the exact source of your danger and confusion.
And that creates a terrible loop.
Yeah, so the addiction isn't just to the individual, it's an addiction to the desperate hope that clarity and peace will finally come from the exact same place the confusion came from.
That is spot on. You keep returning to the poison, convincing yourself that if you just act the right way, it will suddenly transform into the antidote.
That is wild, and that perfectly sets up the third lens the source explores, which is Robert Greene's perspective on power dynamics.
Right. Greene's philosophy centers heavily on how human beings perceive value. In these relationships, intermittence artificially inflates a person's worth.
So withholding affection creates obsession.
Exactly. The toxic partner doesn't feel magnetic because they are inherently more loving, more attractive, or more suited for you. They feel magnetic simply because they are vastly more difficult to secure.
Scarcity manipulates our perception of worth.
Yes.
If they are rarely available, our brains just assume they must be highly valuable.
You aren't resting in a collaborative partnership. You are essentially running an exhausting, endless political campaign just to gain access to them.
An exhausting campaign. That's exactly what it feels like.
And to tie all these behavioral observations back to the physical brain, the source uses a fourth lens, neurobiology.
Highly reminiscent of Andrew Huberman's focus on cue-based cravings and state-dependent learning.
Right. If the highest highs in the relationship come completely unpredictably, your brain begins hyperfixating on the specific environmental cues surrounding those rare highs.
Like what kind of cues?
It could be the specific chime of a text message, the smell of their cologne, or a certain time at night when they usually finally decide to reach out.
So the brain literally pairs massive surges of both desire and dread to a simple iPhone notification sound.
Exactly. The neural pathways become deeply entrenched. The brain learns this maladaptive lesson very efficiently.
Which is why the source so explicitly compares toxic love to severe substance addictions like alcohol or cocaine.
While it's not chemically identical to ingesting a foreign substance, psychologically and neurologically, you experience the exact same intense cycle.
Anticipation, the peak hit, the devastating crash, the craving, and the desperate pursuit.
Right. But with a toxic relationship, you carry the added existential burden of your own identity being attacked.
You're left staring at the ceiling wondering, who am I without this person? Was any of that connection actually real?
Exactly.
Why do I still deeply want the exact thing that is destroying me? It makes the trap so incredibly sticky. So what does this all mean?
That is the big question.
Right. If your biology, your memory, your psychology, and these invisible power dynamics are all actively conspiring against you to keep you trapped in a loop, how do you actually hack your way out of it? We need to provide a tangible way out for the listener who might be recognizing themselves in this right now.
And that brings us to Coach Jacky's NITTI framework.
NITTI.
Yes. It transitions us from diagnosing the theory into actionable neurological rewiring.
Which is what we need.
Exactly. NITTI is an acronym guiding the recovery process. It stands for name it, identify the hook, track the body, tell the truth, and interrupt the imprint.
Okay, let's break these down. The first thing Coach Jacky suggests is hacking that terminology. You have to name it.
Right. You have to stop referring to the dynamic as, just really complicated love or some epic romance.
You have to accurately label the mechanism. Are you experiencing intermittent reinforcement? Are you caught in a trauma bond? Is this attachment panic or nervous system dependency?
Because the moment you name the clinical mechanism, the mystical romantic spell begins to weaken.
It strips away the poetry.
Exactly. It stops being this fated Romeo and Juliet destiny and becomes a highly predictable, manageable psychological pattern that thousands of other people have successfully broken.
I love that. Moving to the second phase, you must identify the hook.
And this requires a level of brutal self-honesty. What is your brain actually addicted to?
It is rarely the fantasy answer you tell your friends.
Oh, almost never. Are you addicted to the dramatic apology because it makes you feel powerful? Are you addicted to the thrill of the chase?
Or are you chasing that brief moment where you feel chosen, just to prove to yourself that you are finally worth consistency? It's terrifying to realize you might not even like who they are as a person. You just deeply crave the relief of the argument ending.
Wow. Yeah. And once you find that hook, you move to tracking the body.
Which loops right back to the vagus nerve and the cortisol flood we talked about at the very beginning.
Right. You need to start treating yourself like a science experiment. Notice your physical metrics before, during, and after contact with this person.
Does your resting heart rate spike? Do you lose your appetite for days?
Do you feel an obsessive, twitchy urge to check your phone? Are your shoulders constantly tense?
Tracking these physical symptoms helps you definitively separate genuine, healthy chemistry from severe nervous system dysregulation.
If your body feels like it's bracing for a high-speed car crash every time they text you, that is not the feeling of butterflies. That is a biological warning system.
Your amygdala is screaming at you to run, and you've been calling it passion.
Exactly. Which leads naturally to telling the truth.
Telling the truth about the entire pattern, not just the highlight reel.
Because we love to defend these dynamics, right? By saying, but when it's good, it's so amazing.
Yeah, we cling to the peaks.
But the truth requires stepping back, looking at the macro picture, and asking the hard questions.
Well, like what?
Like, what does this dynamic actually cost me? How many days of my week are spent simply recovering from our interaction?
Oh, the recovery time. That's a huge metric.
Right. When I am alone, do I feel clearer, safer, and more anchored in myself? Or do I feel constantly confused, reactive, and physically depleted?
Truth shatters the seduction of the peak moments.
It really does.
And the final piece of the framework is interrupting the imprint. To weaken any addiction loop, the nervous system desperately requires new learning.
You have to systematically reduce your exposure to the cues. Change their contact name, alter your ringtone, block the social media feed so you aren't ambushed by their face.
But much more importantly, you must stop utilizing contact with that specific person to achieve your own emotional regulation.
You have to fundamentally insource your regulation again. Build it elsewhere with consistent sleep, physical movement, and safe, predictable friends.
You have to patiently let the body learn that calm and safety can be achieved without the toxic partner's involvement.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate goal of this entire framework isn't just to stop missing one specific flawed person.
No.
The true goal is to teach your nervous system to stop needing chaos to feel alive. It's about fundamentally recalibrating your entire physical baseline for what human connection and safety should actually feel like.
To teach your body to stop needing chaos to feel alive, that is such a profound, empowering reframing of the recovery process.
It changes everything.
So just to synthesize the core takeaway here for you listening, a toxic relationship is so incredibly gripping because it perfectly fuses dopamine, cortisol, and attachment.
It creates a brutal, invisible illusion.
Tricking your brain into believing that the person causing your wound is also the only medicine that can cure it.
They trigger the profound dysregulation, and then, well, they conditionally offer the temporary downshift. It creates a closed, airtight loop of dependency that keeps you entirely trapped in a survival state.
But now you have the precise language to spot this trap.
Yes.
You understand the brain chemistry, the covert spycraft, the power dynamics, and you have the NITTI framework to biohack your way out. As the source reminds us, when you know better, you can do better. You can actually name the dynamic to tame it.
Exactly.
But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've been talking about this phenomenon strictly in the context of romantic human-to-human relationships.
Right, the mechanics of human bonding.
But think about the underlying machinery here. Intermittent reinforcement, constant outrage, ambient anxiety, followed by the immediate, intoxicating relief of a new notification, a validating comment, or a feed refreshing with new content.
Oh, wow.
Right. If our neurology, our dopamine loops, and our cortisol levels can be this easily hijacked by a toxic romantic partner, are we accidentally trauma bonding ourselves to our phones, our news feeds, and our algorithms?
That is a phenomenal point.
Are we running an exhausting political campaign for access in a digital relationship that is fundamentally designed by engineers to keep us chronically dysregulated?
This raises an important and frankly terrifying question about where else in our modern lives we are blindly outsourcing our nervous system regulation.
And exactly what that dysregulation is costing us on a daily basis.
Definitely something to investigate in your own life.
It turns out, whether it's a terrible partner constantly changing the rules or a glowing screen feeding you intermittent outrage, we all need to check the math on our internal spreadsheets.
Absolutely.
If a dynamic is constantly costing you your peace and the numbers are consistently going down, maybe it's time to cut your losses.